Are you more often sad than happy in your marriage? Are you tired of the conflict, stress, and the heartache? Have you exhausted the catchphrase, marriage is supposed to make you holy, not happy? Do you want to get off the rewarded cycle because you've discovered that after spinning your wheels for years inside of that cliche, you feel more unloved and lonely than ever? Have you emotionally flatlined and you're ready to give up, in spite of counseling and having read all the books on being the most excellent wife that you can be? After all these years, you understand what marriage is supposed to look like, yet there's just more isolation and disconnection. If that sounds like your marriage, you've come to the right spot. Hi there, my name is Lillian, and here I talk about God and the femininity that He created you with, and how that femininity can heal you, give you back your life, and possibly the marriage you've always hoped for. There's a caveat though. As you grow and your femininity shines brighter and you get stronger in the Lord, a true believing brother will love who you're becoming. But a wolf in sheep's clothing will hate your new sense of self. As God regenerates your heart to be the daughter that He always meant for you to be, the wolf will make your marriage worse. Today I want to talk about some of the lies that I was conned into believing about myself as a Christian woman and about Christian marriage. Lie number 1. You lose your femininity when you get married, and you only live through doing the role of a wife. Functioning in the role as an excellent wife is completely different than when you, a feminine woman, is in relationship with a masculine man. Lie number 2. There's only one way to interpret all of Scripture. If you don't read and understand it in your testosterone, you won't understand the truth. God expects you to deny the very way He created you in order for you to accurately ascertain what His intentions are for you in His Word. That the cliche, thinking like a man, will increase your femininity, meaning if you just think like a man, it'll make you a better woman. Lie number 3. It doesn't matter whether you experience love from your husband, because your feminine feelings and emotions can't be trusted. The only thing that can be trusted is the masculine. He must feel respected. Lie number 4. Accepting the idea that romance is a real outcome in and of itself, and that the feminine heart needs and wants to be romanced instead of related to. Lie number 5. Believing that romantic gestures are authentic cleaving and that they can create a one-flesh relationship. Lie number 6. God gave the responsibility of cleaving to both men and women equally, and that if He's not doing it, you have the responsibility for it until He does. This lie is probably the biggest display of the ignorance Christianity has about the difference between the masculine and feminine creatures. There's a lot of incomplete teaching on marriage from Christian voices. I know you wouldn't think that with the amount of books and channels and information out here, but about 99% of all the information is merely the same recycled teaching from the same masculine perspective. Almost all of the Christian teaching on marriage has been keeping women blind to their true power and purpose within their own femininity. We've neglected all of our own feelings and emotions because Christianity's masculine perspective has neglected them. So, in following their perspective, we've lost the ability to embrace being daughters of God. Yet, it's Him who gave us all these emotions and feelings. How can they be irrelevant? Or worse, how can they be wrong or bad? They're not. God wants you to enjoy the feelings that come with all those emotions He created inside of you. But they're not just for your enjoyment, though. Femininity, your femininity, was created to bring an energy that's both soft and colorful to the world. But that's not all. Our feelings and emotions are an enormous benefit to masculinity inside of marriage, and they're also a warning system for us. There's a lot of responsibility that femininity embodies. That's why Satan has worked so hard to disable, dismantle, and disorder it. The more time he can keep you in a masculine mindset, striving to be the excellent wife, and the longer he can keep you gullible about the truth of your wonderful juiciness of your inner girl, and the deeper he can convince you that you're supposed to be neglecting and ignoring all that femininity that God created inside your body, the easier you are for him to destroy you. Satan is not going to attack a woman the same way he attacks a man. The masculine and the feminine are two completely different species. Your femininity is never going to benefit you or your marriage or the kingdom until you learn first to accept your feelings as an authentic part of you, and second, learn how to advocate for them and navigate in them the way God intended. One of Satan's biggest deception on women is romance. Women were created to receive connection, not romance. But Satan has tricked us into thinking that romantic gestures are connection. They aren't. Romantic gestures done for you are how and where the breadcrumbs hide. Remember, I said those two words, to and for, would surface in the whole series. I'm going to dip into them again here. Some of the biggest examples of breadcrumbs in marriage are done by Hallmark cards, FTD, and Cineplex theaters. In your marriage, you've got an anniversary and a Valentine's Day. There's other occasions too, like your birthday or Mother's Day, if you're married, but I'm just focusing on the ones that are typically classified as romantic. So your husband buys a card for you. He buys chocolates for you. He buys flowers for you. He buys a gift for you. He buys a movie ticket for you. And yet, you still don't feel any interpersonal connection to you. There's still nothing happening to your heart. Doing things for you are not the same as relating to you. Cleaving to is what happens in between your anniversary date and Valentine's Day. Cleaving to is the atmosphere in the relationship that masculinity is cultivating so that you can respond to him. It's not the event or the occasion that he does something for you. Doing for others is what we're all commanded to do, for everyone. Buying a card for someone's special occasion is thoughtful. You can do it for a wife, or your daughter, or your son, or your mother, but it's not cleaving to them. When a man buys flowers for his mother, nobody would say he was cleaving to her, or that it was a romantic gesture. It's a kindness for a mother, but it's not romantic. There's 365 days in a year, and let's say you get acknowledged for all 4 of those days out of the 365. Mother's Day, your anniversary, Valentine's Day, and your birthday. Acknowledgement on those occasions doesn't create a one-flesh relationship. The one-flesh relationship is created in between those occasions. It's called breadcrumbing. When you have 4 special occasions out of 365 days, those 4 occasions are the bare minimum. Breadcrumbing is the bare minimum. It's the least amount of investment into the relationship. Yet, in marriage, women are convinced it's a relationship that's being cultivated through romance. If you've felt disconnected and unloved, even isolated in your own marriage, it could be because you've allowed Hallmark cards and FTD and movie theaters and restaurants to substitute breadcrumbs for a true one-flesh relationship. Breadcrumbs can also hide in routines that lack intentional thought and initiation. They're still events or happenings, they just fall into benign patterns. A few examples of how that was, for me, was that the only attention my heart got was on a schedule. A kiss hello, a kiss goodbye. But the real confusing part was that Dean expected me to come to the door to receive it as he was entering or leaving the home. Do you see how my feminine need was turned against me? He positioned me to be the one that was moving towards him to cleave to him. It didn't feel right in my heart because it was wrong for the feminine. Another example is that he was buying me flowers. Sounds nice, right? And it was, the first few times. But then a pattern emerged, and I saw that every Friday after work, I was receiving the same $5 cut flowers from the same grocery store. I felt guilty for seeing the pattern. It seemed like that wasn't a healthy response, so I struggled with that same experience for some time, until the day came when he walked in the door and didn't hand me the flowers but set them on the table because I wasn't in the room. He didn't come and find me to give them to me. He set them down on the table and said, "Your flowers are on the table. I'm going out to the garage." Breadcrumbs enable a man to do the bare minimum of function for you, like doing the dishes for you, buying cut flowers for you, or cutting the grass for you, or buying a card for you. And we call it intimacy in relationship, even though he was in the kitchen and I wasn't, so there wasn't even a glimmer of eye contact. I was told this is emotional connection. I was told to appreciate the act, even though I didn't feel love or emotionally connected to. I didn't experience the feeling of being cleaved to. The counsel I received was masculine mindset training. Men truly appreciate acts because they're action-oriented. There's a huge difference between believing you're loved at the analytical level in your mind and the feeling of knowing the experience of that love in your heart. Let's turn it around and apply that same Christian counsel to a husband. Have you ever read or heard counsel that tells a man to just pretend he's being respected by his wife? You know, your masculinity doesn't really need to feel that she's respecting you. As long as she says she is, as long as you know it in your head, that should be enough. Doesn't sound right, does it? Because it's not. It doesn't work for masculinity, and so we shouldn't accept that it would work for femininity either. 1 John 4:16 says, "And we have come to know and to believe the love that God has for us." If there's two different experiences in our relationship with God, doesn't it make sense that we would have two different connection points within our relationships as brothers and sisters, especially when it comes to marriage? There's a depth of intimacy that comes with being known versus the elemental surface believing. Jesus makes that distinction for us in Matthew 7:23 when he said, "Depart from me, I never knew you." There's no real relationship without being known. You can think you're loved, but not feel loved. I knew God loved me. I believed he loved me because he loves everyone, right? It wasn't until I began my healing journey that I actually felt his love inside me. Knowing God loves me is a completely different experience than believing he does. When a man does things for you, you believe in your head, but when he cleaves to you, that's how you know it. Being known is how the feminine heart experiences the feeling of being loved. You know you're seen. The reason 2 and 4 matter so much is because they mean completely different things when it comes to a one-flesh relationship. They land in different spots inside the body. If he's cleaving to your heart, then the smallest gesture that he does for you doesn't just feel like a gesture of kindness. It actually becomes a gesture with a romantic overtone. The effect of that romantic overtone is what exponentially increases the growth in your one-flesh relationship. The attachment and connection are super magnified. But it's not the gesture itself. It's what that gesture lands on inside your feminine heart. If a gesture is done for you on your anniversary and he's been authentically cleaving to you, it lands on that pre-existing relationship work that he's already done. He did the relationship work in between Valentine's Day and your anniversary. That's why you experience warmth, fulfillment, emotional connection, and sexual attraction. If your husband is doing the work God has outlined for him in Ephesians 5 and 1 Peter 3, you'll feel loved and invested in. You'll feel seen, and you'll experience being known and contributed to. When a woman experiences that reach into her heart, it's a palpable feeling. It's as tangible as if he's reached out and physically touched her. If his masculinity has already done the work of cleaving to you, receiving from him becomes easy and a joy, and you'll be able to allow your femininity to respond to him in emotional attachment, and you'll want to connect with him. But if he's not cleaving to you, there's nothing for that gesture to land on. There's been no atmosphere created from him investing into you. There's just the gesture itself in isolation. That's why it feels almost painful, because it just falls into a void, because he hasn't done the work that was required for your feminine heart to catch it. So there's just a hollow of an empty space of nothingness. This looks like you receiving a card and a dinner out on Valentine's Day and on your anniversary. But in between those 2 days, for the rest of the year, no cleaving, no connection, no being seen or known. So instead of experiencing a fill-up of romance from the emotional connection and attachment, all those feelings that came from the feeling of being seen, known, and loved, your femininity feels like she has to lie. Remember, we've been taught to not trust, feel, or express our emotions. We've been told to neglect them instead of authentically validate them. In fact, Christian teaching has said to reward any effort a man does, even the most minuscule effort. Do you see it? They've told you to train your husband to breadcrumb you. You train a husband to breadcrumb you by accepting what doesn't feel good to you instead of being honest and truthful. Masculinity doesn't operate that way or learn from that. Men are efficiency machines that constantly run cost-benefit analysis on the back burner for every scenario. When you reward a man for doing a 7 out of 10 towards your heart, he's not going to do an 8 next time. He's going to do a 6. That's the nature of testosterone. So by not expressing your authentic feelings, you end up feeling neglected and further isolated. Actually, worse than empty, because you've extracted from the nothingness within your own heart in order to respond with a fake feeling of being emotionally connected, in hopes that you get an 8 next time. Remember, the feminine receives, then does. She feels good to respond with good. So in the case of breadcrumbing, you're expecting your inner girl to respond out of receiving nothing into her. She can't. That's not how God designed femininity to respond. So all she can do is fake a response of good, because there's been no masculine touch point as her source. You try and receive those gestures that he does for you so that you don't hurt his feelings. You try and experience the love that's not coming into your heart, because Christianity has told wives that's what an excellent wife does. And you try and try and try to feel hopeful at the moment of cognitively accepting what he did for you. But instead of feeling loved and known and experiencing growth in the one flesh relationship, you experience a deficit. The gesture done for you that you tried to accept and embrace just turns into a deathly loneliness, because the feeling you experience, again, is deferred hope. Your husband hasn't previously cultivated into your heart. Those gestures done for you will not create emotional connection. The only way gestures of kindness done for you will connect to your heart is if your husband is already cleaving to you. If he's not, it only lands on the surface in the cognitive analytical space, in your head, and then it's gone. If you're being breadcrumbed in your marriage, those gestures become more crumb-like over the years, more painful, more disconnected, more sad, and lonely, because every breadcrumb exposes more lack of connection from him. But if he's cleaving to you, those same little gestures he does for you, as they're interspersed on the top of your marriage, they fall down deep into your heart, because he's already created a kind of pocket or a landing space inside of you. Your feelings matter. Your inner girl will signal to you whether you're being breadcrumbed or not. How do you feel 2 or 3 weeks after the special occasion? How do you feel in the in-between of special occasions or events? Do you like how it feels? When you're being cleaved to, it feels like a magnetic glue that pulls you towards him as he reaches into your heart, as he breathes his masculine source into your femininity. Breadcrumbs feel like a gasp of air that you've been pining and craving for, and then it disappears on the exhale. If respect is the language of love for men, and we know it is, then being cleaved to is the language of love for a woman. It's not romance. If you feel alone in your marriage, it might be time to lean into God and away from your husband in order to reflect that truth back to him. I've put 2 videos in the end cards where I talk about both of these biblical concepts. Bye for now, and I'll see you in the next one.